Our hearts are truly saddened in the case that we have lost a great friend, a great man, and a great president. Many citizens of the United States are mourning over a wonderful president who we have recently lost. Words truly cannot describe the way that we are feeling about the loss of such a great and admirable man. He was not only a friend, but also a loving father and a loving husband. He was a man full of love, joy, and had hope for our country. John F. Kennedy was human, just as any of us. He was always smiling, always friendly, and an honest hero. Kennedy was truly blessed beyond belief with being popular, charming, and handsome. John F. Kennedy was born on May 29, 1917, in Brooklyn, Massachusetts. Kennedy was born into a very wealthy family. He was raised as an Irish Catholic. Kennedy's nickname was Jack. He was born into a very large family, being the second child of 9. At the time of his youth, Kennedy was a bit of a mischievous child and did not do very well in school. Although he was this way, Kennedy succeeded in having so many great accomplishments throughout his lifetime. During his youth, he went to a Catholic boys' boarding school, which was located in Connecticut. At this school, he exceeded in history and English. Although Kennedy remained a very poor student, it was very clear that if he would apply himself and actually tried to do his best, he was certainly brilliant. Kennedy was very sick during his adolescent stage. He oftentimes had been sick with the flu, severe cold, and the scarlet fever, and many other undiagnosed sicknesses. These sicknesses caused him to miss months of school at a time. He was also on the brink of death a few times as well. Although he missed lots of school and was sick all the time, Kennedy still loved to read. They were not always books in which his teacher assigned him to read, though. He was a bit of a slacker when it came to his education. This changed immensely when Kennedy began college. He grew much more serious about his college profession. After graduating from his boarding school, Kennedy spent one semester at Princeton in 1936, transferred to Harvard University. Even though sports and women sometimes came first for him, he still succeeded very highly in many of his classes. Kennedy grew very serious about his studies when he became an upperclassman, finally realizing his full potential. As a research project, Kennedy decided to research and write a paper on World War II and why Britain was unprepared to fight Germany at the time. His paper was done so well that after Kennedy graduated in 1940, his book was published. His book, Why England Slept, had sold over 80,000 copies. After graduating from Harvard University, Kennedy had decided to enroll himself into the Navy. He was a commander of a torpedo boat which was located in the South Pacific. In the year 1943, his torpedo boat, the PT-109, was hit by a Japanese warship. There was much damage done. The PT-109 was split in two, 2 sailors had passed away, and Kennedy had injured his back very badly. Kennedy hauled another injured soldier by his life vest and led many others to the nearest island. They were rescued nearly 6 days later. Due to the situation and all that Kennedy had done, he was given the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for an extreme heroic conduct. At this time, Kennedy also received the Purple Heart for his suffered injuries. After this, Kennedy was discharged from the Navy. Before becoming the United States' 35th president in 1961, Kennedy served in the United States House of Representatives from 1947 until 1953. He also served in the United States Senate from 1953 until 1960. When Kennedy turned 29 in the year 1946, he made a decision to run for the United States House of Representatives. Due to his family connections, family money, and the fact that he was a true war hero, Kennedy won his election. Although he was ecstatic about winning his seat, he found his work to be somewhat boring and dull. From 1947 until 1952, Kennedy served 3 terms in this office. He wanted to make a difference, and from his standpoint, he was not going to in the place where he was at. He was seen as young and inexperienced. In the year 1952, Kennedy strived to find a seat in the United States Senate. Kennedy hired his brother Robert Kennedy to put together a campaign for him. And again, he was also helped by his father's financial situation. Kennedy again won this victory. Many people saw him as the new face in which that they were looking for. He was a true gentleman, he was dignified and intelligent, and he was very well educated. During his time in the Senate, Kennedy still continued to suffer from many illnesses. After a surgery during his recovery time, he decided to write another book. He called it Profiles in Courage. His book once again was very successful. Due to his wondrous writing, his book won the Pulitzer Prize in 1957. Kennedy is the only president to have won this prize. After years of being in the Senate, Kennedy again was looking for something bigger. A couple of years later, on November 8, 1960, Kennedy became the 35th president. He had beat Richard Nixon by less than 0.25%. Kennedy's presidency was a truly historic event in many aspects. He was the second youngest president at the age of 43. Theodore Roosevelt became president at the age of 42. Kennedy was the first president who was born in the 20th century, and he was also the first Catholic president. On January 20th, 1961, Kennedy delivered his inaugural speech, and this is where the famous quote came from. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. During the time of his short presidency, Kennedy had many great accomplishments. One of his first great accomplishments happened in 1961. Kennedy created the Peace Corps. By the end of the century, there were over 170,000 volunteers in the Peace Corps, and within these volunteers, they were serving in 135 different countries. In the same year of 1961, President Kennedy also created the Alliance for Progress. His hopes for this was that he could reduce poverty and spread communism within Latin America. Kennedy was also involved in international crises. One of the greatest crises in which he was involved in was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy had found out that the Soviet Union had sent nuclear missiles to Cuba. At this point, he made a promise that he would do all that he could to protect the United States. Approximately 8 months later, Kennedy discussed the limited nuclear ban treaty with the Soviet Union and with Great Britain to stop and ease the Cold War tension in which was happening. This was one of Kennedy's greatest and most proud accomplishments. One of Kennedy's last presidential acts was the Civil Rights Act, in which he passed in 1964. Which was passed in 1964, On November 21st, 1963, Kennedy made his way to Texas for a campaign experience. The next day, he was riding down in a Lincoln Continental convertible, throughout cheering crowds. He was with his wife and Texas Governor John Connally. From a window of the Texas School Board Depository Building, former Marine Lee Harvey Oswald fired shots at the vehicle. Kennedy was hit by both bullets in which were fired. He was brought to Parkland Memorial Hospital and made his way to heaven shortly after. Kennedy died at the young age of 46. There have been many conspiracy theories that have talked about the events that led up to the assassination of Kennedy, but the official version is that Oswald had done it alone. Just after Kennedy was elected into the Senate, he met a woman by the name of Jacqueline Bouvier. They met at a dinner party. He had asked her on a date, in which she had said yes. On September 12, 1953, they were married. He and his wife had 3 beautiful children. They were his world, and he was theirs. My heart is deeply saddened, and my deepest sympathies are with them on this day. We will forever keep Mr. Kennedy in our hearts, as well as in our memories. Kennedy is now in a better place, although he is truly not where his friends, family, and many others want him to be. Life can oftentimes be a little unfair. The death of President Kennedy was a tragedy in which affected the entire nation. Kennedy was one of the greatest presidents that there ever were, and there will eventually be great presidents once again, but probably not as wonderful as him. He would want us to continue on our lives, but keep him in our thoughts and memories as we go. John F. Kennedy will be greatly missed by everyone. It is very clear that he has made a great and positive impact on so many people's lives. He will forever be in our hearts.